Joining me now is John Stevenson, a member of the One Nation group of Conservative MPs and also the chairman of the Northern Research Group. And also with me is Matthew Lazar and Tom, who will be getting involved in the discussion. John, thanks very much for joining us. Just let's start by clearing something up, because, of course, I founded the Northern Research Group. You're the chairman of it. Now, I read in the newspapers that the Northern Research Group, like a sort of collective sort of lemmings throwing themselves over the cliff, are going to make a decision as one. But we're both involved in that. Of course, it's a group based on geography, not philosophy. So I think we may even find ourselves on the opposite side of the argument this evening. But there is no collective view from many of these groups in Parliament, is there?
That is absolutely correct, and you're absolutely right about the NRG. We are a geographical group of MPs come together to fight for the interests of the north of England. But within that group, there are diverse opinions on a variety of subjects, and this is one of those classic ones where there is a division. So there is no collective view from the NRG. There's going to be independent and individual views, and we'll have to wait and see what happens tonight.
Absolutely right. But this issue of immigration is one of those big cut-through issues in the Red Wall. Without the Red Wall victory by Boris Johnson in 2019, there may still be a Northern Research Group of Conservative MPs, but it will be a lot smaller. And where you're out knocking on doors in Carlisle, as I know you do all the time, is this issue, illegal and legal migration, something that comes up on the doorstep a lot?
Absolutely, and I think it's a very important issue for the members from the north of England. And I think there's two elements to this. Let's take legal immigration first. I think there's a high degree of tolerance for legal immigration.
What, 750,000?
No, I'll come to that. But people do accept that, if people come here legitimately, have a work ethic, make a contribution to society, that's absolutely right. And there is, to a certain extent, a need for legal immigration. I think there's a concern at the level of it, and I share that concern. I think we've got to get it down substantially to more manageable levels. And I think you're starting to see that. The government, to their credit, have introduced policies which will see that drop significantly over the next 12 months. And I think that will be welcome. People accept and are tolerant of legal immigration. Illegal immigration is something completely different. Carlisle's prime example of where that concern is arisen. We've had 2 hotels there that have caused a great deal of angst locally, and I think they want the government to address the issue of illegal immigration. It's how we go about it that I think is a critical factor.
OK, so a bit of an existential threat maybe to the Conservative Party in the Red Wall. It certainly feels like that where I'm from in Rosendale and Darwin. You're part of the One Nation group of Conservative MPs. We're all in the same family, but sometimes we do all have the ability to have differing views. We saw last night a big boost to Rishi and his authority, the One Nation group, come out and say, basically, we're not 100% happy with this. This is the ways in which we think it could be improved, but it's probably the best compromise to hold the Conservative Party together. I listened quite carefully to the statements they made, and they didn't say all One Nation Conservative members of Parliament would vote for it. They said most. Now, do you hear from your group that there'll be abstentions, and if so, how many?
Well, I think you've got to look at what the issue is, and I think this is my concern about colleagues generally. We all want to see an end to illegal immigration, all of us, in all wings of the party. We want to see it done as quickly as possible and in the best way we possibly can. And I actually think the Rwanda issue is just part of the solution. It is not the complete solution. And we seem to have lost sight of that a little bit. We seem to think that the Rwanda issue will end illegal immigration overnight. It won't. It will be part of the mix.
Part of that overall plan to stop the boats.
Correct. But we've got to look at other policy issues as well, our relationship with the French, what we can do with other countries, are there other countries that we can go to. On the specific of your question, I would anticipate that most One Nation Conservatives will support the government tonight.
Some may not.
We'll have to wait and see. But I would like to think most colleagues will look at the big picture and actually say, what are we trying to achieve here? It's in the interest of the Conservative Party. It's actually in the interest of the country to get this through and vote accordingly.
OK, so to get this through, so let's say it goes through the Commons this evening. Let's say it goes through all of the other stages, which we won't bore our viewers with, and gets through the House of Lords unamended. So this policy sort of lands perfect and intact, so sort of curate's egg, some good, some bad, but a reasonable compromise. Will it work? Will this piece of legislation that Rishi Sunak and our government has brought forward, will it, one, seaplanes take off and take people to Rwanda before the general election? Will it stop the boats?
Well, I think the policy, broadly speaking, will work in the sense that I think you could see people being taken to Rwanda.
Even after all of these, so we've heard today, we've been talking about today, there are going to be legal challenges to this. No point running away.
Of course.
The judiciary will not take this lying down.
Right.
We've heard some of them coming out and saying anonymously that they're unhappy with the sort of, the altering of a finding of fact by the Supreme Court. These individual legal challenges are going to run and run. So I go back to that point. Let's say it makes it through Parliament by end of January, middle of February. Are any of those legal challenges going to be finished by May, where there could be an election, or October? Or are we still going to see these planes grounded?
Well, I think you're unduly pessimistic about that. And I actually think that the nature of the bill will ensure that there will be people going to Rwanda if it gets through the parliamentary stages. So I think that will happen. However, I don't accept that it will then stop the boats. That in itself will not achieve that. You've got to look at the wider policy initiatives that the government's bringing forward. I think better arrangements with the French, looking to other countries. I think there's going to have to be a pan-European solution as well, because, as you well know, the problems of immigration, illegal immigration, is far greater in places like Greece and Italy than it is with the United Kingdom. So I think there's going to have to be a European view on this. But interestingly enough, a lot of European countries are starting to look to Britain and see what we are doing and thinking, actually, this is a good solution. We want to be part of that, and I think in due course they will be.
So, look, my view has been for quite a while, actually, is the right policy, wrong country. I think there are great issues that face the government getting planes off the ground to Rwanda. I mean, not least the cost. It's cost a quarter of £1 billion so far, and no one's gone there. Have you heard anything from the government about what Plan B may be? Do you think they're talking about other countries or this pan-European police force that we've actually heard from the Labour Party? Matthew Laza's been saying that's the main Labour policy. We'll come to Matthew in a minute. But have you heard anything from the government in your discussions about sort of Plan B,
well, I haven't done anything.
C, D, E, and F to try and stop the boats?
I haven't done anything directly, but quite clearly there will be ongoing discussions. And I think we are aware that they have been looking at other alternative countries, and that's the right thing to do. Any government policy has to be as flexible as it can be. It's got to be as wide-ranging. And you don't have one solution to a problem. There's going to have to be several. So I just think the Rwanda bill is just part of that. It is one part of the mix.
But massive division. We're very good friends, by the way. John and I, we are very good. We are not divided. But even as two serving Conservatives, we've got to admit this is not pretty. Yeah. Massive division within the party. However we get through this, whatever happens tonight, and I won't ask you for your prediction because I guess, like me, you just don't know.
We don't know.
But do you think we are warring tribes, to use the terminology being used in the press about the Conservative Party today, who can unite behind our Prime Minister to go ahead and fight that general election as a unified team?
Well, I don't think we help ourselves, that's for sure, certainly at this moment in time. But actually, the next general election will not, in my view, be decided by immigration policy. It will be one of the policies in the mix. The reality is it comes back to those two basic questions. Who do you want as your Prime Minister? Who do you think is going to be best for the economy? And if you look ahead into the months ahead, inflation will continue to come down. Wages are rising above inflation. Unemployment is incredibly low. There is investment going on, particularly in parts of the north of England. The triple lock will kick in. The minimum wage will kick in. I think economically things are going to improve over the next few months. It is incumbent upon our party to unite, and if it does, it has a good argument and a good case to offer the electorate at the next general election. If we continue to have division, then it becomes far more difficult.
So, Matthew, I'm going to bring you straight in there because, of course, John talking about there, some of the things Keir Starmer's been talking
John,
about.
I thought, quite a lot of what you said. You come and join us. Escape the psychodrama.
You can't have him, he's too good. You're not allowed to take him.
I mean, John's a very reasonable and sensible voice, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that even if it does stop the small boats, even if Rwanda does go through, it won't be enough to stop the small boats on its own. Yet the Prime Minister's given that impression. I mean, I think the problem is he may well have been forced into a corner by these Australian political strategists who are frankly, running the country almost. And so therefore all the eggs are in this basket. And as you say, we might not even get there. And if we get there, it may not work. It may very well not work because other things need to be done, which the government's neglected while it's focused on this gimmick.
I think it will work, but it's just got to be part of a mix. That's the difference. And if you look at what the Labour Party are offering, as far as I can work out, it's unmitigated, uncontrolled immigration.
Absolutely.
There is no policy initiative coming
there are the things you want, John.
I think that is recognised by people in my area of the country. They think, well, you've got to get on and do something, but the other lot aren't offering anything at all.
Well, I think Labour's got to be clear, as we've discussed, Labour's got to be clear about the alternative. It shouldn't shy away from talking about it, but it wants to do many of the sensible things you're talking about, like using anti-terrorism laws to smash the gangs, like better actually getting the action that we take with European countries to work, rather than just giving money to the French.
But Matthew, doesn't Keir Starmer need us as Conservatives to be talking about immigration? Because if, as John says, we do see an improving economic picture. Now, there's very, very mixed indicators about that, but, you know, fingers crossed, we all want Britain to succeed. Do see wages outstripping inflation, do see house prices sort of stabilise, mortgage rates come down. Isn't that sort of putting Keir Starmer on a sort of a wicket he may not want to play off?
No, I mean, I think that Labour's will be talking about the economy a lot because, you know, after 13 years of Tory government, we're seeing an economy that's basically flatlining at best. Our inflation may have halved, but it's still higher than anywhere else in the Eurozone, higher than the US and the rest of the industrial world. So that's not a great track record. So Labour will be on the front foot on the economy, but it shouldn't shy away from immigration because I can't say the word crystallises the Tory failure, because how many manifestos have you fought and won elections on, gents? 4, saying you'd bring it down to the tens of thousands,
winning, though.
thousands, and it's 700,000. You didn't win the 2010 with an outright majority. But, you know, we cannot see the cynicism that these hollow promises have brought to politics. And I think the electorate see that. They realise that it needs the hard, detailed work that Keir's promised in his speech today to bring down migration and tackle illegal immigration.
Tom, you know, what's your view as a Conservative commentator about John's point he made about everyone coming together, one happy family to fight the general election? Likely?
Well, I'm not actually a Conservative, so I'm actually quite neutral in this. But my point would be that I think the Conservative Party, quite rightly, has been criticised for some time for raising the salience of the issue, raising the prominence of the issue of immigration, meanwhile doing the opposite of what they said they would do. The Rwanda policy seems to me to be the pinnacle of that, insofar as there's been so much discussion, so much battling over a policy that they're still failing to implement. And I think, aside from anything else, if you're in a situation where over the course of the past 13 years, you've been saying one thing on immigration and doing another. It's not as if numbers have stayed where they are. They've been skyrocketing over the course of the past few years.
There
is a certain point at which the
election... It's since COVID. So, I mean, one could argue that during the COVID pandemic, we effectively shut down our nation, as many people... Immigration was almost zero during that period. So these huge numbers that we're seeing...
Well, it was net, didn't we actually send people went home,
didn't they? So these huge numbers that we're seeing, it's sort of like 2 or 3 years rolled into one. That's why I think the Prime Minister quite rightly spoke last week. He said we're going to increase the salary threshold, something the Labour Party have been calling for some time. He said we're going to see this big drop. And maybe he's right. Maybe this is a sort of, if you like, a glut coming through after COVID. And we have seen this in countries around the world. So if that drops off quickly, it may reduce the salience of this issue for voters.
It may well, and I think that's an important point. Not only is this the consequence of shutting down the economy for so long, so little inward migration, you also, of course, had some of the one-offs insofar as the refugee schemes in terms of Ukraine and so on. I'm actually very liberal on migration. Numbers I don't think are necessarily the issue. I think the problem is that the Tory party has also struggled to communicate this to the public, to take the public seriously enough to say that we do have these shortages, but here's also a longer term plan for making sure that we're upskilling our own population. They've just constantly, yourselves have just constantly tried to speak out of both sides of your mouth. And I think the problem with the electorate now is they've tuned out. You make promises.
All of our houses.